Everyone, welcome to today's podcast webinar from agilecoach.com.au. We're going to talk about dependencies today, and I'm going to jump straight in. I'm going to talk about how dependencies are managed in a waterfall sense and how that differs when you're working in an agile mindset and an agile way of working, whether it be process or just principles. So I've got my little subtitle that I've put to this podcast, which is "Don't beat them, understand them," and that's much because I should have really put "Don't try and manage dependencies, work together to deliver things." And that's really the mindset that changes from being a traditional project manager where you think you can manage dependencies. And I actually find that tends to be when things fail, the blame game starts, and it's an us and them thing with dependencies. What we try and get to work in agile teams is say, well, let's work together to deliver these. Let's focus on customer and get these things delivered. So I'm going to unpack what dependencies mean in an agile sense and how ridiculous it can get when you try to distinguish them. And then we'll talk about some process on how you can deliver them. So let's get into a definition of dependencies, just so we're clear on this and so we're all on the same page. So in an agile sense, a dependency is everything you need to deliver an outcome. So we have a parent outcome and everything that needs to be delivered, every iteration, every increment that we do is part of that outcome, and it's a dependency towards it. It's a dependent, parent and children, dependents. If you're going to Google dependencies in project management, it will almost certainly say all of the tasks that are done by them, not us. And you manage the tasks. Well, Agile doesn't try to stay away from task-based work. It tries to stay outcome-focused and intent-based leadership. So we don't go down that route with dependencies, but we do have something that we refer to dependencies, and that's more about whereabouts you are in the flow often. So let's look at a flow of a little mini project, mini outcome that we're going to do. And I'm going to go through this first, and then we'll talk about how you can work well together to get things delivered. So I'm going to use one that's a little bit easier, a little bit fun. It's making a cup of tea for a customer, and that customer is my lovely wife. So my lovely wife wants a cup of tea, and I've already made a mistake here, and I left this mistake in when I prepared this particular webinar. Is I've put delivering a cup of tea for my lovely wife. Well, actually, the outcome is a cup of tea for my lovely wife. I shouldn't have put delivering there. That's a verb. It's a doing task. We don't want tasks. We want the outcome. The outcome is a cup of tea for my lovely wife. And then we should also be thinking of like we say, well, in order to get a cup of tea for my lovely wife, what are the things, what are the constituents of that? So and I'm going to put those into a flow because that's how you think, right? You think, well, do that. We'll need those three things. We'll need them in that order. So first thing is you confirm there's a need. You need water. You need tea. You need to integrate. You need a process to integrate the two. You need milk, and you need to deliver. So those are the outcomes that we can say. So if you're working in an OKR system, the objective is a cup of tea for my lovely wife, and the key results are we've got the water done, we've got the tea done, all of that. Okay, so bear that in mind that we've got a flow. Now, which of those would you say are dependencies? Because that's when we start to think about that. By the way, this scales. The cup of tea might be part of a breakfast. So you can say the cup of tea and the main meal. And so this scales. But at the moment we're saying really small scale. Everything is a dependency except the first step, in my view. So you can't do anything else because there's a flow because we go into the next one. Everything's a dependency. So we should treat everything and manage everything with a very high level of quality. But if you were looking at it from instead of a team and an outcome perspective, so if we assign these key results out and said, Alex, you're responsible for water, tea, and integrate, I'm going to have a different view of that outcome to, let's say, Sava if he was given the goal of confirming the need, and if Novak was given the goal of delivering the outcome at the end, so he just does the delivery, or even if we say the milk was split and we haven't got any milk in the house, so Woolworths are involved in that. Each of those individuals is going to have a different idea of what the dependency is. So, for example, for me, if I'm looking after the water, the tea, the integrate, and the milk, my dependency is confirming the need. So my dependency is on Sava. I'm only going to find that out when I get into doing the planning, but I'm going to be very clear on what my dependencies are. Sava, because he's at the beginning of the flow, hasn't got any dependencies. Novak's at the end of the flow. He's going to do the delivery then. So everything he's dependent on. He's probably going to be looking more at the task just before, the outcome just before, which is when's the milk been added as being the main dependency. And then I've got Woolies on here because Woolies were going to be delivering my milk. They probably don't care so much. They're not really part of the internal team, but for them, their dependencies are going to be those things before, but they could deliver that milk sooner. So that would come into the planning as well. I'm opening this up. We're going to go into this in a second about how we do that. So really on this mini project, everything's dependent on one another. So what I'm really getting at here is let's just drop dependencies. Let's just drop it. Let's just go, you know what? We've got an outcome. We've got loads of results that we need to deliver that outcome. Let's just treat work as work and be clear about the quality of how we manage that work and how we track and plan and collaborate on that work. And let's just drop dependencies. Let's drop the idea that we manage people over there, that we manage tasks of other people. That's not a great way of working. And the reason is because when we look at the customer and we go and talk to the customer, they do not care a single bit about dependencies. They don't care that it took longer because you were depending on those other. Nothing's worse. Nothing's worse than when you get I don't know, you get some work done in the house. Oh, it's not my fault. It's this other person's fault. This third party's fault. You've got to stop thinking like that. You've got to think about how the customer sees it. So, the reason why I'm so passionate about dependencies is I want teams to be as good as they can. And once we start to think of an us and them, we start to plan work out saying, well, there's the dependencies. Those are the things that are likely to become blockers, for instance. You're already setting that up rather than trying to be the best you can. And I want to be as good as a Formula One pit stop team. I mean, Formula One pit stop teams, they obviously know that they either win or they lose. It's simple as that. And I've got one on the screen for those on the webinar. You've got a team of about 20 people changing 4 tires in like 3 seconds. It's amazing. You don't get there by all being task oriented and saying, well, that's your fault, that's our fault. You take responsibility for the outcome. And that's how good I want teams to be. So how do you get that kind of performance? I've already touched on it. Stop thinking about dependencies. Stop thinking about that's us, that's them. Everything's dependent on one another. We can't deliver half of this. We have to deliver it all. We're going to deliver it all. And we have to be clear on what outcomes, sub outcomes there are to the main outcome. So I'm going to give you a few tips about how you can create that culture and that mindset in the team. And then I'm going to give you some physical tips about how you can actually process this. So number 0, I put it as 0. Obsess about the customer. So the customer, what do they want? They want a cup of tea. Now, they don't just want a good cup of tea product. So you've got to obsess about the customer. The customer's going to want a good product, quality, and they're going to want it on time. Third thing they're going to want, they're not going to want to pay through the nose for it. They're not going to pay $10 for a cup of tea. So time and budget are important. We can't ignore those. That's obsessing with the customer. But the quality of the product is also important because you want them to come back and get it again. But they won't come back if it takes 20 minutes for a cup of tea as well. So that's number 0. I didn't even put it as number 1. Before you even start, obsess with the customer. Obsess what you would want if you were the customer. Okay. Now I'm going to go through some other things that you can do. Number 1 is very similar to obsessing about the customer. Stop thinking about the tasks that need to be done all the time. Start thinking about what's the outcome. So when we do that, we start to think a little bit differently. So if we've got something like, right, water, the outcome, we need water. We need water to be in this tea. You start to ask questions. Well, what temperature would it be? What makes a good cup of tea? Well, the temperature has to be this. Okay, how much water? What makes a good concentration of tea? You start obsessing a little bit about the product and the quality of the outcome rather than the task. Well, my job is just to add water. My job is just to add water, and that's what I'll do. You start to change that mindset within the team that you go, you're responsible for the best water. You've got to get the water just right. And when you start to put that together, then you start to get those, I'm going to call them requirements, but the story, you get the story of what makes a great cup of tea. Well, water's a big part of it. So it's worth having it as an individual item. And again, you've got to go back. What does the customer want? So you'd make sure you got that. I'm going to go into how we get that in a second. Number two. So if you are working in a team or you're working with other partners, you bring them into the team for this particular outcome. Visualize what it is that you're doing. Don't just write a big requirements document on this, there, and then they tear out their page and go, oh, that's my requirements. Visualize what it is you're trying to achieve, which is the cup of tea. Visualize it on a board. And I'm going to use some agile language now. It would look something like this. We would say the outcome is at the top. If we're going to use epics, for example, the cup of tea is the epic. Again, I've left in the delivering, which was a mistake. We want to, a cup of tea for my lovely wife is the outcome. And then underneath, we'll create those stories. As a customer, I want water to be 100 degrees and I want only 200 mils because I don't want it to be over diluted. You've got to get that quality into your planning and your outcome and the way you're going to deliver it in order to be able to deliver the best. Excessive for a cup of tea, I agree. But if your cup of tea isn't good enough, this is this is one of the ways you can improve it. And of course, I'm being almost silly doing a cup of tea. 5 minutes, you're going to get it right, right? Things aren't that simple. They're a lot more complicated. And I can see projects run for 2 or 3 sprints where this isn't done very well, and people go, "Oh, but it's a big overhead and it costs so much money." 2 or 3 sprints for an average team, it's going to be like, I don't know, 500,000. So you're going to spend $500,000 on something. Spend the time to visualize what you're going to be doing, and it also leads to being able to track it. We're not doing that in this episode, but you can track it and collaborate as you go as well. So visualize the outcome that you're trying to achieve. 3, if you are working in a team, it doesn't matter how collaborative you are, you're still individuals. So I'm a big soccer fan, play and a coach now. Everybody, when they go on the field, knows where they're playing and what their job is that day. They're all playing football. It's the same game for everybody, but we don't want them all playing the exact same game. We want them doing slightly different things. That clarity for them when they go on the field before they start playing is so incredibly important. The way we create that, as well as visualization was the first part, is we have these ceremonies that allow you to do that. So I know these videos about dependencies, but I've moved away from dependencies now. I say, don't do that. Don't try and manage dependencies. Let's get our outcomes, even if it is something that's dependent on someone else, run the same way, the same quality, the same quality. So refine that with those people. Plan it and review it with those people. So refine it. So we're talking about whether we do milk. So when we say, well, we're going milk, let's get the people in who are going to be on the milk. So everyone in the team's in there. Woolworths and Alex are there. What do we want? Do we want skim milk? The customer said they want full fat. How much milk are we going to need? We're going to need this much. Do that together. Right, okay. How are we going to do it? The planning comes next. And then when you finish, review and make sure you get better at it next time. So we're talking about how to get quality. Now, when you're doing that planning with the milk, for instance, you're going to want to leave that meeting as quick as possible. You don't want to be there all day. So, okay, planning, we've got the milk, we've got the requirements, we know they want skim milk, etc. We've got the story there. Let's just split up. Right, Woolworths, you're going to deliver the milk now. I'm going to add the milk. Let's go. Autonomy. Brilliant. Everyone knows what they're going to do. Let's go. I think this is my last one as a tip. Be clear on those priorities. Everybody should leave that planning meeting clear on priorities. So we've got the priority. If this is the top outcome priority, this is for us. We know what we're going to do. But because we're talking, this video is about dependencies. This one's about dependencies, right? This webcast, this podcast. If you listen on podcast, it's about dependencies. You've listened to this because you want to know about dependencies. Woolworths, in this example, would be what you would consider to be a traditional dependent. We're going to rely on them. They're not really in the team. So before we leave that planning meeting, we need to understand their priorities as well. So because you know your priorities, you go, well, this is the top priority, so we'll just get it, we'll confirm the need, we'll do the water, we'll do the tea. You get to the milk, well, Woolworths are actually part of another team as well, so we need to know what their priorities are. When is it they're going to get that delivery done? And so if we just take their task and we put that into all their deliver milk task, because we've broken it down into tasks by now, we put that into their other task list that they've got on for the next week or 2 weeks, depending on what your increments run. They've got to deliver eggs, deliver bread, deliver milk, deliver Coke, deliver shampoo. They've got all these other stuff for other customers, other teams they're working for. You've got to ask them, where do we fit within that? If they go, look, you're halfway down. I've got eggs and milk to deliver to these customers over there. That's more important. You're not going to get yours till for 4 hours. Those are going to get theirs first. We can then plan our work around that. We can't change their priorities. We just can't. It's just not the way it works. We can try, but you're going to fail. You're much better off planning around that and working together as a team. So know your priorities, and knowing the priorities of the organization that you're in, of the ecosystem that you're in, is really, really important. All right, I'm going to wrap this webinar up now, guys. So what did we cover? Well, we covered what dependencies are. It's everything. Everything's dependent on everything else. There's the exceptions where The very first steps aren't dependent on anything, but everything else is dependency. Everybody's waiting on everybody. It's just the way it is. Um, and it depends where you are within that. Don't think dependencies are different. They're just normal cards on the wall that happen to have something that comes before them, which is almost everything you do. We are trying to get with this series, this Accelerate Agile series, and particularly how we manage dependencies, we're trying to solve those problems which cause teams not to be the best. So we want to be the best we possibly can. And the tips we've gone through to try and get that is a change in mindset to look at the customer, to always think about the customer first. How would the customer want this? And to really focus on quality and to visualize. When we do that, we get people to visualize what it is they've got to attain. We try to focus a lot more on the outcome than we do the task. We will break down tasks. We don't not scared of that. And we'll do that by working together and collaborating through a set of ceremonies that refine the plan, the review. Finally, everybody needs to have autonomy. Everybody, in order to give people the feeling that they own something, they need to own something. So make sure that when you're doing these sessions and people are leaving those sessions, they feel like they know what their job is. When they go on the field, they know what position they're playing, they know what they've got to do. Most people, when they go on a field, they know they're there to win the game. They know how the team is going to play, but they also know what they've got to do. All right. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed that. Go and check out the other episodes at my website or subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or the newsletter in LinkedIn. And I wish you a very good day.